saying from the beginning, as long as people need help, we should be able to provide that support to those people. It is callous and it is thoughtless to cut the help that families need while we are still in this pandemic. There are still potential additional waves. We need that help to continue at the same level. So we're going to continue to apply pressure on the Liberal government not to cut the help to people by $800, which is what they're proposing to do, and to reinstate the full support that people receive so they can continue to get by in this tough time. Secondly, we have called on this government to stop fighting Indigenous kids in court. Let us be very clear. Those court dates are happening. One just happened on Monday. The court dates continue where the Liberal government and Justin Trudeau are taking Indigenous kids to court. They're fighting Indigenous kids despite a Human Rights Tribunal decision that states clearly that the Canadian government willfully and recklessly discriminated against these kids. Despite that discrimination, this Liberal government and Justin Trudeau are appealing that at the federal court. They are fighting that decision. We are calling on them to stop this legal battle, follow through with the orders, the over 19 orders issued by the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, and walk the path of reconciliation. The deadline for a motion that we passed, which was also successful in calling on this government to stop the legal battles and to give us an update on their steps to stop these legal battles, as well as implementing all of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. That deadline, that 10-day deadline, is tomorrow. So we're also waiting to see if this Liberal government is going to follow through on the progress report that we called on this government to do. In fact, all parliamentarians who voted in favor of this motion, our motion, to push this government, this Liberal government, to do something. So those are the two things that I wanted to raise with you. We are going to continue to fight for justice, continue to fight for families and people that need help, and continue to fight for Indigenous people that deserve dignity and respect.
Donc aujourd'hui, je vais toucher deux enjeux. Premièrement, c'est le fait que le gouvernement libéral va couper l'aide aux familles de $800 7 juillet. Ça veut dire dans quelques semaines, ce gouvernement libéral va couper l'aide aux familles qui en ont besoin. On sait que la pandémie n'est pas finie. On a toujours une grande menace de cette pandémie et les potentielles fermetures dans l'avenir. On sait que presque 2 millions de personnes dépendent sur la PCRE et c'est essentiel que le même niveau d'appui continue. Le gouvernement libéral et Justin Trudeau ils ont déjà annoncé dans leur proposition de couper cette aide. On rejette cette approche, on dit que c'est une mauvaise approche et le gouvernement libéral doit renverser leur décision. Justin Trudeau doit renverser sa décision. Deuxièmement, notre motion pour arrêter les batailles en justice contre les enfants autochtones, ça continue. Les batailles continuent. Malgré le fait qu'on ait passé une motion qui déclare clairement que le gouvernement libéral doit arrêter ces batailles, arrêter de poursuivre en justice les enfants autochtones. Ce sont les enfants autochtones que le tribunal de la droit de la personne du Canada a décidé ils étaient discriminés clairement et malgré ça, le gouvernement libéral et Justin Trudeau continuent de les poursuivre en justice. Donc, on continue de mettre la pression pour arrêter. Et en plus, demain, c'est la date où, dans notre motion, on a dit que le gouvernement libéral doit donner un rapport pour montrer ce qu'ils ont fait pour suivre la motion qui était passée dans la Chambre des communs. Ça veut dire qu'est-ce qu'ils ont fait pour mise en œuvre les appels à l'action ou qu'est-ce qu'ils ont fait pour arrêter les batailles légales contre la communauté autochtone. Donc, on va voir demain si le gouvernement faire quelque chose, s'il donne un rapport ou non. Et donc, on va voir demain. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. Je suis prêt pour vos questions. I'm ready for your questions now.
And we'll all take questions, starting with questions on the phone. As usual, one question, one follow-up per reporter. Nous allons maintenant prendre les questions, commençons par les questions au téléphone. Comme à l'habitude, une question de suivi. Opérateur, avons-nous une première question?
Oui, merci. La première question est de Raymond Filion de TVA. La parole est à vous.
Merci. Bonjour, M. Singh.
Bonjour.
J'aimerais vous entendre au sujet de la motion du Bloc qui va faire l'objet d'un vote cet après-midi. Est-ce que tous vos députés vont voter en faveur de la motion ou il y en a quelques-uns et quelques-unes qui s'opposent, qui sont mal à l'aise face à ce qui est proposé?
Cette motion, c'est une motion qu'on appuie, c'est une motion qu'on a déjà dit, ça suit nos valeurs Et c'est clairement quelque chose qui est important pour le Québec. Donc, on va appuyer cette motion. Et moi, comme chef, j'étais clair que c'était quelque chose qui suive nos valeurs. Et effectivement, comme le Parti néo-démocrate, on était là pour défendre la langue française. À plusieurs reprises, on va continuer d'être là pour défendre la langue française et aussi d'avancer la justice pour les gens du Québec.
Donc, tous vos députés, sans exception, vont voter en faveur de la motion?
On va appuyer cette motion et c'est la position de notre parti d'appuyer cette motion.
Opérateur, prochaine question.
Oui, merci. La prochaine question est de Catherine Lévesque de la Presse canadienne. La parole est à vous.
Oui, bonjour, M. Singh.
Bonjour.
Un peu dans la même veine, parce qu'en fait, il y a plusieurs motions là, qui vont être soumises au vote tout à l'heure.
Oui.
À commencer, je veux juste m'assurer de savoir de laquelle vous veniez de parler. Est-ce qu'on parle bien de la loi 101 dans les entreprises sous juridiction fédérale? Vous allez voter en faveur de ça, si je comprends bien.
Oui, on va voter en faveur de cette motion aussi, mais l'autre motion, c'était la motion, je pense, sur ce que
La Constitution.
Exactement, sur la Constitution, exactement.
OK, d'accord. Si je peux juste me permettre mes deux questions. Si on commence par la loi 101, donc vous dites que oui, vous allez voter en faveur, mais pensez-vous que les libéraux devraient voter pour également, puisque ça vient faire environ la même chose que la modernisation des langues officielles qui a été présentée hier?
Donc, je veux souligner quelque chose ici, que le gouvernement libéral a proposé un projet de loi hier, à la dernière moment. On sait que le gouvernement libéral est en train de déclencher une élection cet été ou dans l'automne. Donc, c'est effectivement un geste symbolique. Et on va suivre avec précision si le gouvernement veut vraiment, honnêtement faire quelque chose pour moderniser la langue, une langue qui doit être modernisée. Si il veut le faire, on a le temps, on a 2 ans pour passer ce projet de loi. Mais si c'était seulement un geste symbolique, on va voir quand le gouvernement décide de déclencher l'élection. S'il décide de le faire cet été ou dans l'automne, ça veut dire que cette geste hier, c'était seulement un geste symbolique. Pour nous, on veut effectivement passer les lois qui défendent la langue française au Québec et à travers le pays. C'est essentiel. Et un élément de ça, c'est la modernisation de la langue de la loi sur les langues officielles, mais aussi plusieurs autres exemples de mettre en œuvre la loi 101 au niveau fédéral. On peut le faire. Si le gouvernement veut le faire, on va voir.
OK. Et sur cet autre vote, donc le droit du Québec de modifier la Constitution, il y a au moins une de vos députées, Léa Gazan, là, qui s'est inquiétée hier pendant le débat que cette motion, en fait, pourrait avoir un effet sur les langues autochtones. Je me demandais, est-ce que vous avez l'assurance que tous vos députés, même Mme Gazan, vont quand même voter en faveur de cette motion?
L'inquiétude qui touche les langues autochtones, c'est une inquiétude qui a raison et c'est une inquiétude importante. On sait qu'au Canada, depuis longtemps, les langues autochtones étaient menacées, donc on doit mettre plus des efforts pour protéger les langues autochtones, de défendre les langues autochtones. Donc ça, c'est quelque chose de tellement important et c'est une inquiétude qui est vraiment une grave inquiétude.
Opérateur, prochaine question.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question is from Charlie Pinkerton of iPolitics. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Good afternoon, Mr. Singh.
Good afternoon.
My questions are actually related to the motion today from Jack Harris,
Yes.
M62 on Jack Harris. Please excuse me if this was asked about in French, but assuming that Liberal MPs vote down this motion today as debate on it seems to suggest, What do you think that shows about the Liberals, I guess, commitment on something like this, as they've sort of indicated they're open to study? And as well, where does that position you and your party, given that before the last election and after it as well, dental care and improving federal coverage for dental care was something that you had indicated was was something that the NDP would only give their support to the government for if they themselves adopted.
Dental care is really important. When I've spoken to people across the country, they tell me that this is one of the most costly, important parts of their health that they are not actually spending money on because they can't afford to. I've heard from so many people who tell me that their dental health is failing and they can't afford to fix it. I met with people in my own riding in Burnaby South who came to me, and during the meeting, the woman that came to me could not remove her hand from her covering her mouth because she was so embarrassed by her teeth, and how this is impacting people's ability to get employment, their quality of life, and their health. And it is very arbitrary that you could go into a hospital and get open heart surgery, but if you've got a problem with your teeth, you can't have any help. That is a serious problem. And so what we are proposing is a way to fix that. And our proposition would actually cover a significant number of Canadians immediately, with a view to putting in place universal dental care in the future. But we could immediately cover the people who need it most with a federal plan. And that's what we've proposed in our campaign. And that's what Jack Harris's bill is about. This would basically give coverage to everyone in Canada who's got no coverage, who earns less than $60,000. Immediately, they would get coverage. And this would save families thousands of dollars, and it would mean a big difference in their lives. The Liberals, we fought with them to start to consider this. They mentioned it in the throne speech after our fight to say this is a priority. But like many things, they talked about it, but they haven't delivered on it. And they did the same thing with pharmacare. They eventually campaigned on it and then voted against it. So with the Liberals, I don't have confidence that they're going to follow through. And that's why I encourage Canadians, if you want to see universal pharmacare, if you want to see dental care, New Democrats are your only option. We are the ones that are consistently committed to improving our healthcare system. And we've seen time and time again that neither the Liberals nor the Conservatives, nor frankly the Bloc, care about improving access to these universal social programs.
Okay, and I sort of gathered this from your answer just now, but will this be something that the NDP continues to push on, whether that be in a election potentially in the fall or going forward, even though, as we might see today and as it seems we'll see today, there's really no other party in the country that would support this expansive of a program right now?
Absolutely. We're going to continue with dental care. It's a priority for us. It's important to us. And the idea of standing alone is not something uncommon. We're the only party in the House that voted in favor of taxing the ultra-rich. The Liberals and Conservatives voted against that. We're the only ones that stood on the side of people there. When it came to pharmacare, again, the other parties voted against it. We're the only party that stood up against the big pharmaceutical companies and stood with Canadians. So we're not unaccustomed to standing alone, but we stand with people. And that's what sets us apart. The Liberals stand with the big pharmaceutical companies, same with the Conservatives. They stand with the ultra-rich. We've always known where we stand, and that's with people, that's with working people, that's with families. We're going to stand with them.
Operator, next question.
Thank you. The next question is from Annie Bergeron-Oliver of CTV National News. Please go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Singh. Thank you
there.
for taking my question. Hi. I just want to talk to you a bit about the farewell speech that your member from Nunavut gave yesterday. Mm-hmm. She said in that speech that she is often stopped by security in the House of Commons, that she doesn't feel safe, that she feels racially profiled, and that happened on a number of occasions when she was in Parliament. And I'm wondering what your reaction is to that powerful speech that you gave yesterday, and how you think that Parliament can be safer and a more welcoming place for Indigenous, Black, and other racialized MPs.
I really appreciate the question. And I want to say the Mumilaaq speech was very powerful. And she spoke with the voice of a lot of people who have been made to feel like they don't belong in politics. Women particularly have consistently been told that they don't belong. And she also raises really a fundamental question about the systemic racism that goes into who people think are actually parliamentarians. Because for so long, parliamentarians have been older, white men, that's what the vision or that's what the assumption is. And so someone like Mumilaaq really shatters that notion of who a member of parliament is in a good way. And it really speaks to a couple of things. One, we need to be very vigilant and continue to apply pressure on the House of Commons and Parliament to become a more welcoming space for Indigenous people, particularly for women, for racialized people. That's something important. But I think what she also said, and I want to highlight, which was very powerful, is that one of the reasons why she said she felt she didn't belong is because this institution and previous governments and the House of Commons and Parliament have actively denied justice to Indigenous people. They've actively actually created the conditions of injustice. And that was one of her biggest reasons to be an institution that has been contributing to the problems that our people face is one of the reasons why she decided she didn't feel welcome. I think that's a very powerful speech and a very powerful declaration of what we need to do is to change the direction of government, a government that should be working to bring in justice for Indigenous people, that works for the people of this country and particularly the First People of this land. That's a very powerful message that she used her last words in Parliament to convey. And I commend the powerful words, the courage it took to share those words. And I hope that they spur action and some changes.
And as my follow-up, it's going to be a two-part question, so I apologize for that.
Sure.
One, what kind of immediate changes do you want to see? You know, a lot of people assume that there will be a fall election, which means there's going to be a lot more people who are coming in potentially. What changes do you want to see so that new members of Parliament coming in and those currently serving feel safer, feel that they can walk through the halls without potentially having security asking them for their ID badges and being racially profiled, as she suggested? And the other thing is, you know, you've now been in Parliament for quite some time. I'm wondering what your experience has been.
My experience has been a great experience on that regard, but I think for many reasons I stand out in a different way and don't fit the same. I don't fall into the same problems that women often face, and that racialized women face. I think that I'm insulated from some of those same concerns, and so that I don't think that my experience is informative because of the differences that I have when we're speaking about my parliamentary experience. But I think we need to just be really vigilant when it comes to, particularly to women and to racialized people, to make sure that steps are taken to make people feel welcome, that they are not being stopped arbitrarily, that this is something that has to be addressed. Mumilaaq raised those concerns and they should be responded to immediately. And I think really the broader vision is making sure Parliament works for people and works for Indigenous people and delivers justice that walks a path of reconciliation that really fixes the problems that Indigenous people are facing. Those are the calls that I have that implement the calls to action, implement the calls for justice from the murdered and missing women and girls inquiry. Those are the things that we need to see happen for real justice. And I call on all parliamentarians to work to that effect.
Operator, next question.
Merci. La question suivante est de Boris Proulx. Le Devoir, la parole est à vous.
Bonjour, M. Singh.
Bonjour.
Concernant votre annonce du jour sur la PCRE réduite, j'aimerais savoir jusqu'à quel point vous aimeriez voir la PCRE maintenue à 2 000 $ par mois, sachant qu'il y a à peine 500 cas de COVID-19 au Canada aujourd'hui.
Merci pour la question. Donc, jusqu'à ce moment, ça va continuer jusqu'au mois de septembre. Donc, je pense que ça doit continuer au même niveau parce qu'il y a plusieurs secteurs qui ne peuvent pas retourner. J'ai parlé avec une chanteuse et son travail s'est complètement arrêté. Elle ne peut pas travailler comme musicienne parce que elle n'a pas les opportunités de travailler. Elle chante dans les événements, les festivals, et tout ça, c'est fini. Donc, on sait que pour plusieurs personnes qui travaillent dans les secteurs artistiques, les musiciennes, les musiciens, les gens qui travaillent dans la culture, dans les arts, les gens qui travaillent dans le secteur du tourisme, et ce sont les gens qui vont continuer d'être impactés par la pandémie. Donc, on doit noter que ce sont des Canadiens, Canadiennes, des Québécois et Québécoises qui vont continuer d'avoir de misère à trouver un emploi ou de retourner au travail
à cause de la pandémie. Donc, on doit continuer l'aide à ces gens jusqu'au moment qu'on a vraiment réussi contre cette pandémie.
Merci. Et en suivi, j'aimerais savoir quel est le processus que vous voulez utiliser pour changer la loi. Est-ce qu'il est encore temps de faire des amendements? Craignez-vous pas que ces 30 ne soient pas adoptés avant la fin de la session parlementaire? Et de manière plus générale, est-ce que vous pensez que les différents projets de loi mis de l'avant par les libéraux peuvent encore être adoptés avant mercredi prochain?
OK, merci. Une question importante. Donc, pour comment on peut régler ce problème, cette coupure que le gouvernement libéral, Justin Trudeau, vont faire avec la PCRE, la solution, plusieurs options. Il peut modifier maintenant la proposition. Ou deuxièmement, et aussi quelque chose qu'on peut faire, c'est après la mise en œuvre de la budget est faite, on a l'option de mettre une deuxième projet de loi qui corrige ce problème, qui arrête la coupure. Donc, il y a plusieurs options. Et ce qui est clair, c'est que nous, les néo-démocrates, moi comme chef, on est prêt de travailler pour régler ce problème. On est prêt de faire n'importe quoi si c'est un autre projet de loi, si on doit siéger pour plus de temps au Parlement. Les options sont là. C'est vraiment une question de volonté. Donc, jusqu'à ce moment, il me semble que le gouvernement libéral n'a pas la volonté de corriger ce problème. Donc, ça, c'est pourquoi on continue de mettre la pression. J'apprécie énormément la question parce qu'on a presque 2 millions Canadiens et Canadiennes à travers les pays qui dépendent sur la PCRE. Et c'est clair aussi qu'il ne peut pas retourner au travail parce que la pandémie continue, malgré le fait qu'on a des bons signes. Les choses sont positives, mais la réalité, c'est les événements sont annulés. On sait que plusieurs festivals sont annulés, donc plusieurs opportunités de travail pour les secteurs touristiques, les secteurs artistiques, les musiciens. Donc, ils ont toujours de la misère. Donc, si ça continue, on doit continuer l'aide.
Et nous allons prendre une dernière question au téléphone, opérateur. Opérateur, dernière question au téléphone.
Oui, our last question is from Ashley Burke of CBC News. Your line is open. Please go ahead.
Hi, NDP. Thanks
Hey, Ashley.
I had another follow-up question about the speech.
Sorry, I'm just having a problem with your audio.
And then this is another follow-up question about the speech of Mumilaaq Qaqqaq.
Yep.
Last night, you mentioned you had a different experience, but I'm wondering in particular, what do you think specifically needs to be done to make Parliament a safer workspace and more welcoming to racialized people?
Listening to racialized people, listening to racialized women particularly, this is something that women have raised, and I think we've got to listen to women and listen to their experiences and what can be changed to address their experiences. So specifically, we know that the experience or the perception of women in positions of power is very different from men. People don't perceive that women are in positions of power, often consider women to be staff instead of members of parliament. So understanding that reality and how that would be compounded by being Indigenous and being racialized. So acknowledging that reality and then being very vigilant about responding to that, making sure there is the appropriate consideration of that. In the next parliament, I hope that Indigenous women who are elected are there is a particular effort placed on making sure that they are a priority in terms of whether they're, knowing that that's a member of parliament, knowing that person should not be stopped, and going above and beyond to account for the fact that for so long, a system has been designed to accommodate a certain group of people, but not designed to acknowledge racialized people or women or people that are often not perceived as those in positions of power. I think that perception has to change, and then steps have to be taken to be very vigilant about putting that in place.
And looking back over the last term, do you think that you could have done more or anything more to support MP Qaqqaq?
I count on, or I consider Mumilaaq a friend, and I will continue to be there as a friend and continue to support. I think what Mumilaaq really raised was institutional problems and problems with the House of Commons and the fact that Parliament has been working against the interests of Indigenous people and how that has made Indigenous people not feel like they've got a place, not just in Parliament, but in Canada.
And that is a serious systemic problem that has to be tackled. And what we need to do is really fix the problems. Indigenous people still don't have access to drinking water. Indigenous children are being fought in court. We've got basic human rights that are being denied. Housing, that is something should be something that anyone can count on, is particularly a crisis in Indigenous communities. And in the north and in Nunavut, this is a particular problem. So those are things that need to be done. As a leader, I always try to do my best, and I always look for ways to improve and find ways that I can provide more support to my team. But what Mumilaaq has really raised are some serious institutional problems with Parliament, with the House of Commons, and with the fact that Indigenous people have been denied justice actively by Parliament for so long, by those in power, Liberals and Conservatives, and how that has to change.
And this is all the time we have. This concludes the press conference. Ici met fin la conférence de presse.
Merci, thank you so much.
Thank